Materials are posted on the back of the room. You're welcome, we thank you for being here. We're here to talk about the budget, and I'm still a little fuzzy on the process, but we're gonna today vote on items that will be the city council's budget, so can be published for the public to review. Last Thursday, we met and we had some suggested amendments, and we discussed those for a period of time. And there have been some other suggestions made just recently, and I'm not sure how to incorporate those in. I really haven't had a chance to review and digest them. I'm not sure how we proceed with that. We have some things we've talked about, and I thought we would vote on. We have some new things that I don't want to dismiss out of hand, but I'm not sure how to incorporate them in the time frame. I'm open to suggestions or some help from the council.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, thank you. I think that probably what the changes you're talking about are actually more specific information to fulfill the suggestions that I made at last week's meeting. So what I had sent out was just a more specific proposal of how we might achieve some of the goals, in particular the half-cent tax rate decrease. And then I did also send some suggestions for the funding things through the city council money. So funding the bridge rather than through city council money, an alternative. So I think that's what those are. These are just more specific things that we probably need to discuss. But I'm hoping that today we will be taking a vote on each source of funds, is what I would recommend, because I think that there's some of us are totally in agreement on a number of things and maybe don't agree on other sources of funds, and the same with the expenses. I don't know what anyone else thinks about that, but I think that that's appropriate.
Councilwoman Raybold.
Benny, I agree with some of your concerns, and so my question to Cindy, have you had an opportunity to review with staff on the numbers that you're presenting to us today that we have to vote on? Because I'm concerned, are they accurate? Are they based on your conversations with the staff? Or how did you come up with the numbers that you came up with?
Sure. So as far as the numbers in the spreadsheet, those were numbers that for instance, the fully appropriating the funds from Keno, those numbers actually were provided to Councilwoman Gaylor Baird. And so I worked within those numbers and those parameters. The amount, I know that you missed last week's meeting, but as far as the money for that would be attributed from the no raise suggestion, those figures were presented to us last week by Brandon Kaufman. Now, with regard to the possible other sources that are on the second page, those were directly from the CIP and the mayor's proposed budget. And of course, we've only had a few days since our suggestions were made, so.
Okay.
Councilwoman Rivera?
I wanted to just talk about Keno, I guess, for a moment, and I'm not totally, maybe you want to explain. It looks like you're taking Keno dollars for the library and directing them to parks. Is that an accurate statement?
So I'm taking part of the Keno funds that were not fully appropriated and suggesting we put that towards EAB. Parks is the one that directs EAB.
This part about replacing library, taking?
Well, so you had that allocated for libraries, that amount in your proposal, but that still, it's from the fully appropriating funds. So it's not money the libraries already have budgeted. It's not money that is already in there. That was just your suggestion.
Maybe we could have finance just explain how the rules governing how Keno's distributed, because it's predetermined by a resolution from 1993 that splits percentages, 65% park, 30% library, 5%, something like that. I can pull it up, but.
Mr. Kaufman, can you help us understand better?
Sure. So the way Keno's allocated is 73% goes to prizes, 13% is for operator share, the state takes 2%, general fund 1%, the county 3.3%. And then there's a slice of 7.7% that is for the city. Then that's further segregated. 65% of that goes to parks, 30% to library, and then 5% to human services. And that was dictated by a council resolution that's been set. So anytime we've allocated any Keno funds, they live within those parameters that the council's already set.
Okay, so in Councilwoman Gaylor Baird's proposal, for year one, she had proposed all fully allocated funds from Keno go to library.
Ms. Shirley Jim.
On the spreadsheet that Larry prepared for her proposal, the top half is uses, where you have the 400,000
Right.
whatever dollars. And then you'll see at the bottom half on her uses in the spreadsheet.
Yes.
She has broken those total amounts of revenue down and allocated them between parks, libraries, human services, even the portions that would go to the state and the county
And,
per this formula. So she identified the total amount of revenue that would come in, but then those lines below show how that would have to be allocated amongst the various partners in Keno.
so in year one, there was no allocation for the state and the general fund allocation. There was in year two, but not in year one. And then
I believe in year one, there wasn't really an increase in the total overall revenues.
okay,
Library wasn't fully appropriating, so that 138,600 brings library up to full appropriations. And then in the second year, that trended a 4% growth, whereas in the proposed budget, I believe it was just flat. So that increased it by 4%, which then is why you have, you know, the state, the general fund, the county, you have those amounts within the second year.
so that, you're saying that library was not fully appropriated in the current budget
Yes.
proposal? And that,
Mayor has recommended in Councilmember Gaylor Baird's proposal that 138,600 brought it up to the full appropriation.
okay,
And is that, Brandon, is that based on the expectation that there will be that 4% increase in Keno funds as it has been trending?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought,
In year two.
in year two.
so can you explain to us why that wasn't all fully appropriated in the proposed budget?
And I think typically, maybe Sherry in the past.
Historically, we have chosen to be conservative and make sure that the money came in and was received before we appropriated it for technology or media for the libraries or parks CIP projects. So I think, on a number of other things, we have sometimes come to you and talked about appropriating unallocated Keno dollars. And so that's where those unallocated dollars came from. We made a calculation, we made a projection, we knew we had to pay those shares for certain to the county and the state per the formula, but we didn't always choose to appropriate every dollar for the parks and libraries, and then that could be allocated to future years' budgets once we actually had the balances available.
Is it generally in the neighborhood of $400,000 each year?
I would need to do some research before I wanted to just give an amount. But for a number of years, the percentages appropriated through the operating budget had not gone up for parks or for libraries. And then when balances were available, then we would increase their appropriations from those accumulated balances.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing I wanted to clarify about Keno and is that with the library, is Pat Leach here?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry. Pat, do you want to come up and just talk about what your plan was to do with the Keno allocation because of what directors traditionally do with Keno dollars? I think it's important to clarify that, given the proposals that have come up yesterday.
Thank you. So on the change that's being proposed in terms of our receiving more of the Keno allocation, is that I believe what you're referring to is that we'll be using that for Bennett Martin evening hours and the building superintendent position that had been earlier requested. Traditionally, we do not fund positions through Keno allocations. That's typically an allocation that we use for things, technology or collections in the media collections, the things that we check out in the case of the library. So we will be amending the budget to have the positions come out of our operating budget. That will then result in some changes within the items in our operational budget to show the positions coming from the operational budget. Then the additional dollars that are coming from Keno will be used to essentially, we're pulling that money out of the operational budget for what we call media. And then we will allocate that Keno dollars, those Keno dollars to purchase additional media at the same amount.
In this spreadsheet, I was just trying to represent the service improvement that would come from this infusion. But to be clear, Keno typically goes for one-time expenses. So she'll be buying books and media materials with the Keno dollars and then freeing up general fund dollars to pay for the
Hours and
positions.
staff.
Yes, so that would come from operational, yes.
Carlos? I'm sorry. Councilman Eskew.
Yeah,
And then
just while we're on
Councilman
Keno, I had a question too about the human services. I see, looks like Cindy that you're suggesting that that $7,700 go toward the bridge.
Correct.
Are there, I was on that committee for a couple of years. Those funds are for human services organizations that are providing treatment and those kinds of things typically, is that?
And preventative, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the problem with that here is that that's really the problem of, that we're facing from the state, is that the state's interpreted that part of the bridge as being custodial or non-treatment. Thank you. So it doesn't seem like a good fit to me. I mean, for those funds, which typically always, I think, are directed towards treatment, but in this particular case, that's the kind of the crux of the problem, is that that's not treatment. It's what the state's telling us.
So, I'm sorry. Oh, okay.
Councilman Camp, Councilman Christensen, then Councilman.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I do have a little bit more of a question then on year one, because on year one in the councilwoman's proposal, there was no allocation for human resources, despite the breakdown we were just given. So, and then in year two was the 7,700.
And again, that's the same answer, that the mayor's budget already includes the human resources portion of the Keno proceeds. That was allocated at the full projection. It was only parks and libraries that didn't have their full allocation appropriated.
Okay, and what about the 305,750 then? That was parks money. That's the portion that goes to parks.
The 305, okay, so this, yes, Larian was suggesting that of the additional of the total amount of Keno revenue that was projected, that she would allocate 305,000 of that to Parks CIP for repair and replacement.
Okay, so there's no problem with us if we wanted to allocate that to the Emerald Ash Borer response.
That would be a Parks related expense, yes.
Okay.
But
John didn't have his.
Thank you.
Please.
Well, a couple things on Keno. You said this 4% equates to 400,000? Is that what you said?
Yes.
So that means 100% would equate to 10 million?
Of Keno revenue, what is our total Keno revenue? 34 million?
34 million a year. Okay. And of that, we're, whatever, so the 4% is overall, and that would be 400,000 more.
Yes.
Okay, with that in mind, really, if you think about it, if we've been conservative in the past, so as we reallocate funds here at the end of August, there'll be that reallocation of that same amount. So you're just accelerating, you're doubling up in 1 year. So exactly what Larian has proposed and/or what Cindy has proposed can be done with the reallocation. Does everyone follow me on that?
Kind of.
Okay,
Thank you. I was going to say
Okay.
no, but kind of.
Apply the formula percentages.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, we were just told that we've been conservative on the Keno revenues and underestimated them by about 3 or 4%. And then at the end of the year, when we know exactly what they are, then those are reallocated. Is that a fair statement?
As the actual revenue comes in, it is deposited either to the parks account or to the library account, but there aren't necessarily appropriations that go against that money.
Well, how do they? Oh, okay, so that's.
Difference
it's-
between cash and authority to spend it. They might
okay,
have
so it's-
cash that
it's
they're
in a-
not
it's in a-
authorized to
It's in a
spend.
piggy bank.
Yes.
Okay, so at the end of the year, they can do that. So it's there, we're almost at the end of our fiscal year, so that amount is there. So that could achieve what you ladies are suggesting, and then, so you're just pushing up, you're trying to get a double amount this year. But actually, in fact, in cash flow, because it's not gonna be there, it's in there, so you can just say for next year, then,
So if it's in there, we can do nothing, it'll be fine?
What amount? I mean,
Pardon me?
I don't know.
Yeah, how do you determine, what is that 4% of something
Well-
that is unanticipated, except when it actually comes in?
well, I mean, again, if you're gonna use up what you consider the surplus, you're getting into that area of anticipating gains. If it doesn't happen, you've got the same problem. I think the current process is working well, so that we are conservative. Again, as Sherry, I think, said, or Brandon, you can't budget, you can't buy widgets, computers, or maintenance items for parks if you don't have the money. And so, just to say you want to budget, they still can't buy it until it comes in. So I think we're getting into a circular argument here, over some elements of the Keno, that the libraries, parks, and human resources are gonna get those anyway. It's just a matter of seeing when the receipts come in, so we don't over-anticipate, so those three groups don't overspend ahead of time.
But
Just to clarify, they have to come in at the percentages that the ordinance, I believe it's ordinance or resolution states they are to be divided. They aren't fungible between the funds. I think that was the point of what we were trying to get across here.
No. I understand that. So in other words, there may have been some confusion. I think maybe
Yeah.
Cindy was thinking she could shift it from library to parks or whatever. And so it's been brought out and clarified, yes, we've got these percentage formulas. So it has to go to those three, human services, parks, and libraries. It has to go there. But it's going to be there anyway. It's just that we won't, if we're gonna go ahead and budget it, then we're over-committing based upon thinking this is going to continue. And I think we have always tried to be somewhat cautionary on our budgeting. So, I mean, a 4% under budgeting is not huge.
I don't know if
So-
they were 4% under budgeting. I don't know who said that. Is that true? I mean, would you say that?
Are we
what
conflating
I said was in the
conservative and under budgeting is the same thing?
Well, I guess we're not as budgeting more than we have. We're gonna make sure we do get it. Same thing with our budget, our overall property tax. We only do 90% of it, and then we catch up at the end of the year to make sure there isn't some blip there.
Roy would like to comment, then Jane.
Question, and it goes to the heart of that. Is it a resolution or is it an ordinance that divvies up those Keno funds? Because that kind of makes a difference.
I'm pretty sure it's a resolution. It's not in the, is it in the code? I would need to research that as well.
Because if it's a resolution.
It is a resolution.
This council could change that if we really wanted to. And in a much easier manner than we could if it was an ordinance. So,
But do we have to do that today?
no, but what I'm
Okay.
saying is,
I think we,
those suggestions are not off the table merely because they don't follow the guidelines in a resolution that was passed in 1993. That's what I'm saying. So just put that out.
Well, I guess in our conversation, I'd like to stay focused here. The Keno is a part here. We've got bigger things of taking, Larry initially proposed 4.9 million out of cash reserves, which is a substantial change and a substantial amount. And one of the things I came up with that I passed on to Cindy was, if you're gonna talk about cash, I think that's the bigger elephant in the picture here, that we need to look at that and some trends. Wherever Keno goes, it goes, and then, decide on some spending priorities here. I think that's what we ought to be staying focused on. We're getting down into the weeds, I'm afraid.
So, I'm sorry, what are you suggesting for the Parks and Rec funds by pointing out where we're at in the process.
Well, I think the Keno monies are gonna take care of themselves, just because they're getting deposited anyway, it's just they can't spend until they know the end of the year. But it's there, so whether you try to anticipate it or not, it's there. And to try to now budget higher, that's getting into a fuzzy zone.
I'm gonna take,
I guess this goes to that and the overall budget process of it. I know that Pat explained how she traditionally handles the Keno dollars, but, you know, with Lynn Johnson, Lynn, would you mind coming up and tell us how you typically handle
need more
the
chairs and
Keno
microphones.
funds? And that way, we know that they can't be rearranged between those three organizations except as established by the percentage that has come through a resolution. But once you get those funds, historically do you use it just for one-time elements, or do you try to redirect it towards, well, you tell me what you do.
Great question.
Okay.
For us, the Keno process is the finance department gives us a projection of the amount of funding that we're going to have available. By the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board has advised us that we really should only be using Keno for repair and replacement projects. 25 years ago, the direction was to use Keno for new facilities. So, for example, Star City Shores was built with that money, that kind of thing. But we've really transitioned away from that, and we're using that money now for repair and replacement to take care of what we have. The money goes in three different places. A vast majority of the money goes into the capital improvement program. We budget about $30,000 a year for contractual services associated with fund development, essentially fundraising activities. And then there is some money that is directed to Barb Byers' salary, the city grant writer in the finance department, and with the understanding that Barb is writing grants for the department that are primarily for capital improvement type projects, although sometimes it is for programming. So we use the money in three different ways. We're very consistent from year to year about how we've used it. And like I say, a vast majority of it, more than $1.3 million a year, is in the Parks and Recreation CIP for repair and replacement.
Quickly, yes.
Yeah.
We're at about a half an hour, and
Okay.
we've made no
promises, right? But I understand that that's your practices, but if this council decides that the extra Keno money, directed, that portion that goes to Parks and Recreation, should be committed to the Emerald Ash Borer, which we're over and over again told is a tremendous priority, then there's nothing to keep you from doing that if need be.
Excuse me, probably there's two different elements of the Emerald Ash Borer Response and Recovery Program. There's the staff and the equipment that are removing the trees. And then there's the funds that are being used for replacement of the trees or planting new trees. The way the Keno has been typically allocated, where it would be used for capital improvements, Keno funds could definitely be used for the planting of the replacement trees. We've not used Keno for staffing previously. That would be a different use of Keno than we've traditionally used Keno for.
But you could. You just haven't done it.
We'd have to go back, I think, and look at the resolution. As Royce said, that there's guidance in the resolution about how those funds are to be used. We'd have to review the resolution.
Thank you.
Other comments? We have a lot of work to do in a short period of time. I'm a little concerned.
So, when's the other comments on which part of this?
On the Keno part of it right now. We're done with the Keno part, I'm hoping.
I just suggest we let things go along as they are, but I don't know if you want to redirect the Emerald Ash Borer or something. I guess that's something we can do.
But I guess the question is, do we need to direct Parks and Rec to do something like that, or can they, in their discretion, reapply it as the priorities dictate them to apply it without us having to dig into the weeds of controlling how the funds that they get?
Well, I think, yeah,
Yes, please, Councilwoman Gibbs.
I've only had a few short hours to look at the revisions, but it appears that the idea is to direct Keno towards funding general fund personnel, which is not a practice that you undertake today.
Correct.
So it's a major change, and that money is supposed to go to repair and replacement, according to the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, and it's possible that you could do contracts for removal or replacement of trees. But in terms of the arborists who are associated with your budget increase, that's not what's been recommended or been the practice of the department.
But they can shift internally, much like Pat Leach was telling us the library would do, so that it keeps personnel in general fund and then shifts other general fund widgets to the Keno money. So I think that, and I agree with what Jane is saying, we give some general direction, but, you know, unless you go hog wild and throw it at the casinos, that's the result we expect.
So, sure, thank you. So can I ask, John, are you saying we leave things as they are, that you're saying we don't go through and appropriate this money from Keno that we really don't yet have, the 445,000 roughly in 1819, and 438,350 in 1920, that we wait until we have those funds?
I think it's going along that pace anyway, based upon the past, because along this current fiscal year, if it's been that roughly 4% over projections, then that same 400,000 is in the kitties of each of the departments, the three sectors. It just hasn't been spent because it wasn't budgeted. Is that not a fair statement, Sherry?
We would need an appropriation, we would need authority to spend that.
So we do that
additional-
here within a couple of weeks or the end of the year, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Typically, that would be in.
so there's your money.
Yeah.
So it's there, and I say let's keep, so really to suddenly go ahead and anticipate on top of what we have, another full year, you know, the next year is gonna be paid out monthly to the kiddies of the respective funds. And so I think we're in something that's already kind of, to finance's credit and others, it's self-adjusting. It's there, the money's not getting lost.
So, okay, so I'm still a little bit concerned that when this proposal was made, there's this extra 4% or the $450,000, and yet there wasn't a recommendation made to divide that according to the formula that we were just told. And so I'm gonna presume that whatever the mayor budgeted, he budgeted in the appropriate percentage breakdown. And so, but unless he over appropriated for something, I'm not sure why we don't have appropriations for all those three areas in this particular suggestion.
You do.
They're right here.
Look at the uses. Parks
Well,
and Rec,
I understand.
library, and then all the others.
And I
Right.
think, Cindy, to address your question about if our projections are conservative.
Right.
And the cash comes in greater than what we anticipated, we have wording in the budget resolution that says the funds are appropriated for those transfers to the county and the state and those other partners that we're required to pay. The only piece that we don't have is the authorization to spend more parks or library dollars than are appropriated in their operating or CIP budgets.
Okay, and I'm sorry, perhaps I didn't see it. What do you have appropriated for the, I'm looking at the, yeah, I see, oh, I see what you're saying. But, so there was no appropriation in first year for the human services, though?
And that's because in year two, Lyrian is actually adding a % to the projections overall. In year one, she's only adding the additional revenue for parks and libraries.
See, they already budgeted a 3% growth in Keno for 1819 and then held it 3% in 1920. And based on the growth of the Keno fund, felt it was reasonable to bump it up to 4% in year two. So it's really just a 1% increment that I've added, but it brings it to a full 4% growth from where it is today.
We're here today to vote on what this is gonna look like, and I don't know how we get there from here. We have kind of like two proposals and some amendments. Do we vote on each one of those suggestions? Do we vote on them as a block, or, yeah? Ms. Garrett.
The process was to submit changes by last week, to then have a discussion on Thursday, and then vote today on those things that we've had time to vet. The things that came in yesterday can still be considered in this long budget process. We've got until August 6th or August 20th to fully adopt a budget. I think without having more information about the sources and uses and the exact dollar amounts, I'd feel more comfortable considering those with further staff input as we move forward. But for today's purposes, I'd feel better about adopting or rejecting the things that we've had time to discuss more fully. That's how I would have imagined this process would work, but I am open to hearing what other people think.
I concur as well, because I know in your proposal that was submitted last night at 4 p.m. on a Sunday evening, family time, I looked at some of the snow removal dollars versus roads dollars, and I don't know if that is the appropriate allocations and the use of inserting that in to make your other numbers whole. And so there has been no time to do the analysis, and I, have questions of staff on that as well, and to get that substantiated. But I agree with Larry, because we only have like 25 minutes left to talk about it, and I'd rather that we vote on elements that were discussed on Thursday, and then we can continue this dialogue and get more input from staff on a whole slew of other issues in a timely fashion and bring it forward during maybe the public hearing and get those numbers substantiated and validated.
Well, so I know you weren't here, but I would just remind everyone, we talked about these ideas not being mutually exclusive in our meeting last week, and we talked about working towards a compromise. And so I don't think anyone, of course, should have been surprised to see actual figures brought forward. That said, I do think, and I'll just repeat it, I think that there are various items that some may agree upon, and some, like I may agree upon some of the allocations or the sources and not others, so I think we should vote on those separately. And then as far as my proposal last week was about reducing the tax rate at 0.5%. And I had made some suggestions of how that could be made. And so these, we're just filling in those placeholders. For instance, with the $850,000 extra that has been a new fund created for Parks and Rec this year, I was suggesting taking $250,000 of that for the first 2 years. And certainly that could be a bigger figure, and those things could be talked about. But where it was added that the downtown public improvements, there was $150,000 per year added to each of the years, above what was in the CIP 16-18, and so I'm just suggesting taking $100,000 of that. And then snow removal is $135,650 that I recommended in year 1, and $154,500 in year 2. And we've consistently seen a refund from, a reallocation of funds from snow removal. And I looked at the actual figures of what was remaining. There was $711,000 remaining in the snow removal fund as of the May 31st report, and I know we haven't had any snow since then, so I'm guessing that, there may be, I only allocated $135,650, which I thought was pretty conservative, but that figure could certainly increase if we have more available. So just to answer those questions, bottom line, I think that probably we shouldn't vote up or down on the suggestions, because the suggestions encompass so much more than just one item. And so I would, again, ask that we vote on each source.
My first response is, wow, that's a lot of voting.
We don't have to, that's just my suggestion.
Larry and I do take a little.
Someone else have an idea on this process? This is a new process for me. I think it might be a new process for
Well, and that's what I
everybody.
was gonna address. I don't know that it's ironclad. We had some unusual proposals last Thursday. And, taking 4.9 million out of the cash reserves is a major change. And so to say we can't, in a matter of Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we're looking less than 100 hours, make some changes, or even 70 hours, I think, or alternative things. I think that's disingenuous. I'm sorry.
Well, my math adds up. I did my homework, And we have the chance to set priorities in this vote. It's not clear that some of the other math being proposed adds up. We could still get that information. There'd still be times to amend the budget later if, in fact, we get to some consensus on how to do that. But for today, I don't see how we can, well, I
Just
would
recognize
suggest we
this is
stick to
another
to
snowball in
voting
the
on things.
Matterhorn going down, and so you put it in what you're suggesting here, saying, well, you could change it later. The snowball keeps going and keeps getting mass, and it's tough to change.
So on the one, you're having us take money out of the city council budget for the one position that we have added as part of a compromise that you led negotiations on, or you were part of negotiations on, and you also have us taking out of the general fund reserve. And I'm saying that while some may be opposed to that, they may not be opposed to taking and fully allocating the Keno funds. And I think that's
I
why.
don't mind voting on the parts and pieces of the proposal that I
Okay.
submitted. I'm sorry if that wasn't clear. You can vote
Oh,
on
okay.
it separately.
But what we're voting on is, it's what was submitted last week and that we discussed on Thursday. What we received at 4:30, 5 o'clock last night.
Wasn't-
I don't see how we can,
It was a proposal for
Process that.
compromise. And so I didn't get any calls back, which I was,
I'm gonna recognize Councilman Christian
Yeah.
for a second.
I have a suggestion on how we proceed here, that, to me, the biggest single thing here is the proposal to take $4.9 million out of the general fund reserve. And so I think first we should vote on whether we do that or not. And then we can talk about if we decide we do wanna take $4.9 million out of general reserve fund, what do we do with it?
sure.
I think that's the biggest single thing we're looking at today.
You want to just start going down?
So we start.
Well, I think first it's just a.
The cash reserve at the top.
Yes, do we take all that money in that cash reserve? First thing.
There are no official motions are needed for this process. We just need to make a roll call vote.
Hold it, Roy, I-
Typically do motions and seconds and call the vote.
I'll move that we take 4.9 out of the cash reserve, spread over the biennium, so it's 2.6 in the first year and 2.2 in the second year for use of one-time expenses as detailed below, but for the revenue source, I'll make that motion.
Seconds?
A motion by Councilwoman Gaylord Baird and a second by Councilwoman Raybold. Additional discussion briefly? Yes.
Well, just a quick question. So that would take us down to what level in terms of a percentage?
I think from a policy perspective, you're over the 20%. So that would draw it down 2.6 million in 18-19, 2.2 million in 19-20. I can't tell you specifically the percent because I can tell you right now you're a little over $10 million over that policy, over that 20% threshold.
Okay.
I'd have to do some projections, I guess, moving forward into the future as to what that percents could be in 18, 19, 19, 20 with a drawdown.
Sounds like somewhere in the middle, 24, 25%, something
Actually,
like
by my
that.
calculations,
Yeah.
it leaves it at 27.3. If
Okay.
you, yeah,
So,
Councilwoman
including the
Raybold?
reappropriate.
clarify, so you're saying that right now, we try to keep it at the 20% absolute.
Mm-hmm.
We try to keep that reserve at 20%, for what reason?
You always have reserves. You have reserves for multiple purposes, emergencies, changes in economics because of downturns with sales tax, which is one of our core revenues. You have reserves, in for various cases for bond covenants, for credit rating purposes. So there's a whole multitude of reasons that you have reserves set aside.
So you're saying at that reserve level that we have an additional $10 million?
So you have a 20% threshold right now.
Okay.
Above that, I think there's a little over $10 million that is above that 20% threshold. That's the policy standpoint. Rating agencies look at it a little bit different. So there's the credit aspect of this too that feeds more into your AAA bond ratings that views this in a little bit different perspective.
And traditionally, what have we maintained that reserve level at?
It's been above 20% in recent years and growing. So, yeah, it's been growing, I believe, since 2008.
Councilman Gaylord?
Yeah.
Well, just,
I mean-
if you were to draw down 4.9 million in 1 year, by my calculations that I worked with the finance department, it would be 27.3% instead of 30. But we wouldn't be drawing it down in 1 year, we'd be spreading it out over 2. So it's still a substantial percentage.
And the idea, Brandon, that I think Lyrian had proposed, or Lyrian, is that we are going to be spending it on apparatus, the fire apparatus replacement that we've been talking about, that we are woefully behind, and that would be a one-time payout, with the understanding that it would save us from going out for a bond? Is that the thought here?
I mean, there is definitely deferred maintenance on fire apparatus, so if at some point you don't have enough cash set aside within your budget, and we don't have enough purchases of apparatus, I mean, you're kind of setting yourself up for a bond issue at some point to purchase apparatus.
And we've typically have been funding the apparatus with a COPS, certificate of participation. So this would allow us to bypass a bond and bypass COPS.
The point of
Yeah.
all the items that I picked for the CIP, from the CIP to be funded by cash reserve was that right now the source, imagined source in the future is a bond. So rather than issue debt in the future, taking a prudent amount from the cash reserve and spending it down to take care of some of these mission critical needs without incurring debt was a good move financially for the city. And in addition to that, financially for the safety of the city, because so much of it is for public safety needs.
There are alternatives here.
Yep.
You're going down a dangerous course. I mean, as Brandon said, there are a number of factors when the rating agents look at us. You know, we were at red line until we did the 13th paycheck in the pension fund, and that solved a short-term fix on that, but it is not a long-term fix. And that's why I'm suggesting, if you're going to, number one, I'm very skittish about taking anything out of the cash reserve, number one. That's a big step. Number two, I don't worry about the bond cost of getting something, but I'm more concerned that if you take it out of there, now you have adjusted this formula. On the other hand, if you'd follow my suggestion, take the 4.9, put it into the police and firefighters pension where we're assuming 8%. You know, we're borrowing from that plan at 8% on the unfunded liability every year. Put that 4.9 million in there, that saves you around $400,000 of interest costs, which is in future plan contributions. And what you've done is, from the rating standpoint, you've lowered a liability over here, you've lowered your reserve here, but you've also decreased the liability, so you've got a balance. So when they talk to S&P and these other rating agencies, we get credits for that. If you take it totally out and buy fire apparatus, that's lowering it down, and as they look at the formulas.
I disagree with that, John, because we're going
Okay.
with the actuarial recommended amounts, plus we have the smoothing in place, and we're one of the probably very few municipalities that are currently funding our pension liability at 82%, which is certainly something that bond rating agencies take into consideration, and to put it where we
Long-term, that
have-
is not financially feasible actuarially, Jane. It is not there. We made one small step.
We work with the recommendations, and I think that's something that we all agreed that we were going to stick to the actuarial recommendations and come up with.
Question here.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
beyond
Well, I'm
the-
just saying,
anyone
put
else
that
have-
in the
I agree.
pension plan
It's a
with that
legit-
400,000
your
savings, buy over a 5-year period, buy a new fire apparatus every year.
So we have a motion and a second on the floor to take from the general fund, to transfer funds from the general fund. Are there other discussions of that item?
So I just wanted to ask Brandon, so this is from the general reserve, the reserves from the general fund reserves. And so, and I recognize there's some needs for apparatus and stuff. Would this be your recommendation, or are you comfortable with us doing this if we were to do this every biennium for whatever our most urgent needs were?
No, and I'd say this is a one-time use. I wouldn't feel comfortable using any more than, doing this one time.
Right. So, you weren't the one that suggested this?
No, I
I'm
didn't
guessing.
recommend this, but,
Okay.
I worked with Councilmember
Right.
Gaylor Baird to,
Yeah.
come up with a level of funding, to utilize from the reserves that would be appropriate, that wouldn't put us at risk from a credit perspective.
Okay. Thank you.
Carl and Roy, neither one of you have commented. Do you have comments? So
This
now-
doesn't follow what Roy said. Roy was talking about just the revenue,
Right.
the top side. Lyrian's motion said, we'll take this amount, and this is where we'll apply
Okay.
it.
I,
You
I,
said-
I can revise the motion to just appropriate 4.9 from the cash reserve.
That's the first question.
Agree.
Would you call the roll, please?
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp,
And where we're gonna spend it, I'll go yes for right now.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird.
Yes.
Motion, Lamb, I'm sorry. I had to go back to the beginning of my score sheet.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Councilman Camp.
Well, I'd make a motion, we take that 4.9 million and put it in the police and firefighters pension plan.
Second.
Aren't we gonna go through? That's a new proposal. I've got a bunch that I prepared and submitted last week. I'd like to vote through mine and what Cindy offered before we start entertaining new proposals. I think that's only fair.
No, I don't wanna
So-
throw the word fair
I-
around here. I think that's, you're going through a lot of stuff here that, you just put this on the table, something we haven't done before in the history. And to say now we'll divide it up all here, when instead of looking at the big picture and seeing that we can achieve all those interest savings by putting it in the pension plan and definitely not hurt our credit rating.
Well, you could vote against the things that it's being used for when we get to the expenses, but we haven't even finished voting on revenue sources.
There's a motion.
Yes, there's a motion and second.
So you're just gonna go down revenue sources now?
No, there's a
We have
motion.
We have 10 minutes left in this meeting, and we're supposed to be voting on the changes that were submitted. So it seems logical to go line by line, as suggested by Roy, starting with the cash reserve, because it's the biggest thing, and it happens to be the top of the list. I don't know what,
So we have a motion by Councilman Camp and a second by Councilwoman Lamb.
If I
to
could,
allocate money. Is there discussion?
right, thank you. Brandon, I just want to know what the savings would be if what we would be saving if in bond interest rate. Just a general, what would be the interest rate we're saving if we put it towards one thing versus what would be the interest rate we're generating by putting it into the pension?
And honestly, I don't feel comfortable
Okay.
being able to give you an estimate on the pension plan because
Okay.
I feel more comfortable if the actuarial analysis was done that told us, okay, if you put 5 million in, this will be your estimated savings.
Okay, thank you.
Other discussion of the motions on the floor? Would you call the roll, please?
Raybold,
No.
Schob,
No.
Camp,
Yes.
Yes.
Christensen, Eskridge,
No.
Gaylor Baird,
no.
Lamb.
Yes.
Motion fails 4-3.
So go through this, the first motion line by line, or should we address the other proposed motion by Councilwoman Lamb?
Well, we have,
Well, I mean, I would move that we continue down. I mean, you took the proposals by seniority last time. If you'd like to follow that process during this meeting, we could just go through all of these first. And then we could take the others. We
Okay.
talked about them being mutually exclusive. That's all I was saying.
So
You can vote.
I'll entertain a motion to address each one of the items one by one.
I move that we take 50,000 from the council budget in year one and 51,500 from the council budget in year two to be directed for other purposes.
Motion by Councilwoman Gaylord Baird and second by Councilwoman Raybold. First discussion, Councilman Christensen.
I think this represents backing out of an agreement the council made, a compromise that had several parts that have been important. And you pull one thread on this and the whole thing can unravel, and it opens the door for people to start going back and rehashing that compromise, as well as the fact that this council needs more support, not just the continued level. We need these dollars to be able to do our job better. I will oppose this part.
Councilwoman Lamb, Councilwoman Raybold for all.
I concur with what Councilman Christian is saying, and I would say that at the time that we made this compromise, we saved the folks that were circulating a petition for recycling a great deal of money in a campaign. We gave up a charter amendment that we had put forward. We fulfilled those obligations under the compromise. It was very apparent that we needed staff, but obviously, even at that time, the majority now, with the minority then, was opposed because they didn't feel the need for staff, although those of us who weren't maybe getting as much cooperation or getting straight answers or had the time. Some of us have jobs outside of the city council, and we felt the need for the staff. Since that time, of course, not only has the recycling ban been put in place for cardboard, but the mayor just recently transferred another $300,000 for recycling education. I hardly think that since we fulfilled our portion of that compromise, that this one thing that we asked and needed should be pulled from our office, especially since I would say because it was brought up that there was maybe not agreement on how that position should look, but that agreement disagreement has not come from the side of the aisle for those who are very insistent on needing staff. So I will not support this.
And I will support this because we're not violating the compromise in one small way at all. We agreed, we support that. But what I disagree is the funding. We don't need another attorney, no offense to all attorneys out there, but we don't need another attorney, but we need a solid paralegal. Or we need another ombudsman, like I wish we could clone Lynn Quinsner and have her with that expertise of knowing how to navigate all the departments and get the answer that we need and work with our constituents and get them the answer they need a lot quicker than what we're able to actually deliver on and deliver on the research. We don't need another attorney to do that position, and that's why I'm going to support this, because it's more practical. Angie's doing a phenomenal job. I mean, Angie's risen to the occasion and doing a job. She far surpasses our expectations, certainly at least mine, about executing on the expectations that we had for her. And to budget that amount is perfectly in line with getting another person who can just, Angie can direct them and they can do the research. That's what we all agree. We want someone to get into the weeds on either legal matters, and you don't have to be an attorney to do that.
So,
Some clarification, I think the motion was to move the money away from that position and do something else with it,
yes, was to
Yes.
take it out of the city council.
and use it use it for the,
Yeah. That position option would go away with the motion we're looking at.
Councilwoman Gaylord Baird.
I mean,
I thought in the budget there is currently an additional sum besides what
It's
the recent proposal.
$90,000.
yeah.
She's wanting it
This takes away
ongoing.
a portion, that could support the bridge, which is a demonstrated critical need for our city. And I guess, while it's not, a pleasure to take this money away from our department, the fact that this position has been vacant, unfilled with these taxpayer dollars are not serving anyone. They could be serving the city in a very critical way. And that's what's the genesis for this particular motion.
Councilman Eskridge?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't think this has to mean that staff the staffing question is done. As I understand it, we have $90,000 in the budget for the staff position.
62.
Okay. If we have a need, if we are hiring a person, we'll find the way to get that money, to get that person in place. But that position, it's been on our books now for a year and a half. And we haven't done anything.
It makes more sense to me that staff that has received 5 to 8% raises, that those raises would go away to fund the bridge versus the council giving up its whole, nearly the entire position. And in fact, when you say we'll find the money, well, what we thought we did, we thought the compromise was about getting that position.
Other comments quickly? I think we're getting a little bit off target
I've
again.
waited
Yeah.
patiently.
Yes, you have. Thank you.
Well, there are a couple of things. We had the compromise, yes, and that's given. When we hired Angie, I specifically said to Carl that, let's see how she does, and so we'll just delay a little bit on this other position, not give it up. And I thought that way we could see and give Angie the open bridle. She's doing a fabulous job, as you said, Jane. We need, in my 20 years, I can tell you, we need something, and this is, I really feel, Larry, and you've been unfair to the city council to weigh this money against the bridge. The bridge is an important element to this society, to our community, no question about it. But as Cindy just alluded to, there are, in our budget, there are easy ways to get $50,000 elsewhere. This city council is just totally vacant of things. We used to have 2 positions. We used to have 12,000 per council member. That's 72, it's 84,000 a year. We had in discretionary funds. We gave that, we've given and given and given, and it's not that we're being selfish in any way. We need to operate and represent the public adequately. And I think we're doing an injustice to this body by handcuffing it and also ankle irons here. This is ridiculous. I think we can find that money for the bridge elsewhere, so it's not a matter of the council versus the bridge. If you want to take the bridge, let's measure it against a lot of other things in this budget, and you'll find dozens that the bridge outweighs. And so I appreciate trying to say, gee, the council will do its part. You're putting us back another 10 years, Larry, with this motion.
Councilman Eskridge?
Yes, thanks, Benny. Last week, Roy indicated that, we need to find ways to cooperate, and looking back through what we did in February of 2017 when we made this, when we voted on things, I'm not sure what kind of deal we had, because not everybody voted for both things. So, but we got them. But I think I will vote against this item, recognizing the importance of staffing, appropriate staffing for council, and as well as recognizing the critical need that the bridge has right now, and work with the mayor's office and finance to see what we can do to find $50,000 to get to the bridge.
Other discussion?
I'll just add in response to some of what John said. It's just harder to find ongoing dollars than one-time dollars, and this was the place I could identify. And if you have an alternative source that you can think of that's ongoing, truly ongoing, that it sounds like Carl's committed to working on that, I'm open to other sources.
Briefly, because I was
Just
going to say
also-
call the roll.
Because I misunderstood that, I'm wondering, what is the amount that we currently have to fund 2 people in the city council? Because you said.
Just available. I think you need to ask the question, how much is available in our budget right now? Whether it's 1 or 2, the
Correct.
money is the
Thank
same.
you. Thank you.
I would just follow up. I'm open to voting this down as well if you can find another source. If you can't, I would probably bring it back at the end of the budget.
How about-
During budget
How about I
discussions.
intervene and say, please call the roll?
Okay, fair enough.
Raybold,
No.
Schob,
No.
Camp,
No.
Christensen,
No,
Eskridge.
No.
Gaylor Baird?
No.
Lamb?
No.
Motion fails, 7-0.
Motion on the next item, please. These are, we're looking still under sources. We have 2 lines for Keno coming up.
I move that we fully appropriate Keno receipts in year 1.
Second.
A motion by Councilwoman Gaylor Baird, second by Councilwoman Raybold. Discussion?
This would result in an increase of $444,350 that would affect only the Parks and Library departments in this particular year.
Councilman Camp?
I just think our current method is utilizing those funds, and so doing this,
This reaffirms what we're already doing?
I'm sorry?
Reaffirms what we're already doing?
Yeah, I think our current method achieves that.
So, kind of a different way of saying the same thing. We're not getting more money, we're just appropriating more money. The money is gonna be there or it's not gonna be there, regardless of this vote. But whether we appropriate it for expenditures is what this is about.
Councilwoman Lamb?
So my question is, so of this $444,350, none of it needs to be allocated to human services?
That's correct. That's already figured into the mayor's budget proposal.
So I guess I don't understand. I thought every dollar that came in needed to be split according to that.
And at 3% increase in Keno revenue in the mayor's budget, the human service and the other transfers to the state and the county are already budgeted at the full 3% increase. We were just waiting to make sure that the money came in before we increased the appropriations for parks and libraries. We can use that money in future budget years, has been our historic thinking.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, so is this a motion basically to increase Keno funding to the programs funded by Keno by 1%
Year
In
2.
parks and libraries.
in year 2?
In-
Councilwoman
We're doing the year 1.
We're in year 1.
Councilwoman Raybold?
Sherry, does it allow us to skip that step of appropriating, or did you say earlier that the language in the resolution on our budget encompasses that as well?
I did say that, but I also said that in the first year of the mayor's budget, the appropriations at this level of revenue that Lyrian's proposing, we increase Parks and Library to. The human service and the other expenditure appropriations are already at this same level.
Okay.
We just chose to be a little conservative on the Parks and Library money and appropriate it later as balances rather than current year revenue.
Other discussion? Okay, we have a motion by Councilwoman Gaylor Baird and a second by Councilwoman Raybold. Would you call the roll, please?
Raybold?
Yes.
Chobe?
Yes.
Camp?
No.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Oh,
Motion carries 5-2.
So we have one more line source, or are those together? We need one more motion for
To
fourth?
do year 2.
I'd like to move that we increase the projected Keno revenue to a total of 4% growth over the fiscal year 18-19, such that an additional $438,350 would be allocated according to the percentages by resolution.
Second.
A motion by Councilwoman Gaylor Baird and a second by Councilwoman Raybold. Any discussion? I like that. Would you call the roll, please?
Raybold?
Yes.
Chobe?
Yes.
Camp?
No.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
no.
Motion carries 5-2.
Thank you. So are we finished with the resolution?
Sources.
Do we need to go through each one of the uses at this point, or is that something we can talk about in the budget later? You would
I
like to
think
make a motion?
they need the uses.
Okay.
We need a balanced budget.
Yeah.
I understand. So I'll entertain a motion to deal with the other items on.
I move that we appropriate in year 1, $772,605 for fire apparatus rate replacement, and then in year 2, fiscal year 1920, $1,772,605 for the same purpose.
Second.
A motion by Councilwoman Gaylor Baird and a second by Councilwoman Raybold. Discussion.
We didn't have a vote on the brine facility revenue.
I'm just going down what I submitted
is
last
what-
week.
Look at
This is
hers.
Lyrian's, what
Oh.
was submitted
Well,
and
well,
discussed
yeah,
last week.
So
So that was one of the line items in my alternate that was for, I'm sorry, for sources.
We're not voting on that. I have just a comment on this. I intend to support this. It doesn't mean that when it comes down to it, in a vote from the dais, that I won't support the idea of taking the
Sure.
whole $4.9 million and putting it towards
Sure.
the police fire pension fund, because I think in 10, 15 years, that is a better plan for the city. That's just, it's a choice between two good things, not a bad thing and a good thing, okay? But it just, so you know, I'm supporting this at this time, and I want to keep my option, let you know, I'm keeping my option open on that 4.9 million.
Other comments, Councilman?
I'd just like to say that I won't support this because I think it's loading up too much in the 2 years, but I think through my suggestion on putting in the pension plan, we can do the same thing. It'll make a couple more years, go maybe 5 years, but nonetheless, we'll do that. And with our national sources and where we can do contracts, we can achieve the cost savings, and that way we don't bunch everything up in 1 year or two as far as equipment, because then you get the same problem down the road.
Other comments, Councilwoman
I have a
Raybold?
question for Brandon. I know that you defaulted and said we would need the actuaries to come out and do that estimation about what would be some of the potential savings
Yeah.
that John is projecting, and I guess I know you've had, in your previous life, you did a lot of this
I had
work.
an actuarial firm that did
So-
all the defined benefit plans, Brandon. You're probably the only one who doesn't know that. Everyone else has heard it a dozen times. And
However, I'd feel more comfortable, John.
when you
Don't-
assume an
don't-
8% interest, whether you level it out or not,
Or smoothing, yeah.
smoothing, it's 8% that we're borrowing, and we have been. And that just adds to the unfunded liability. And this, you take that off the top.
I don't know if that's something that we could get in time for budgeting votes, or is that asking too much?
I'm gonna say maybe it is today.
Today.
Yeah.
Today, but
Is
in
there any-
time for, to
Any other dis-
validate,
Any other discussion on this motion?
because I'm thinking then, if that's the case, then we have to.
I'm sorry I said what I said. Because right now,
Is everybody else who's watching the clock
All
like
right.
I am, we're over budget already.
Understood. Message
And we will
delivered.
continue as compressed as
Okay.
we can so we can get a
Okay.
full discussion of this.
I'm not
Perfect.
against the fire apparatus. I just think we can do it steadier. And I think also, all of this is going to the police and fire too, and the pension plan. So it's all going to public safety by paying down the plan. It's just then it
And
allows
John,
us
I just want to clarify, it's an absolutely legitimate use of cash reserve. I mean, I do not disagree. That is one of the kinds of uses that we could potentially direct this kind of money towards, as opposed to some of the other proposals that have been
I just
sent
think
our
if we
way.
go directly to apparatus or something, that's setting a dangerous precedent, because we just never done this before.
Did you see the picture of the fire truck that went to your district on Friday while we were meeting, that broke down after responding to an injury accident and had to be towed back to Station 6? I mean, the irony. I mean, this is a real problem.
Any other discussion? Call the roll, please.
Rabel,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp,
No.
Christensen,
yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1.
Next item.
I move that we put $500,000 toward fire station modification repairs in both years of the budget for a total of $1 million over the biennium.
Second.
Motion by Councilwoman Gaylord Baird, second by Councilwoman Raybold. Discussion.
Well, you've probably seen the pictures. There's just a lot of problems at the stations that are older. We talked about them. It sounded like there's good support for this item.
Would you call the roll, please?
Rabel,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp,
No.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird.
Yes.
Lamb.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1.
Next item, please.
I'll skip the one that's listed next since there's no funding source for it and move that we allocate $10,000 for LPD's body-worn camera initial phase implementation program. This would allow for the purchase of 10 body cameras.
Second.
Motion by Councilwoman Gaylord Baird, second by Councilwoman Raybold. Discussion? Councilwoman Lamb.
Thank you. I appreciate the use of, and the desire to use the body cameras. I am concerned, of course, about the storage, which will come next. I do think that, though, these aren't really the type of items that we should be taking from the People's Investment Fund. This isn't, it's not a pilot program per se, but it's a minimal amount. And I get if we have failing fire apparatus, that's one thing, but to go out and buy something new at this point, I really can't support that for this small scale project, and I don't think it really fits the bill for why we would want to take out of the People's Investment portfolio at this point in time.
Other discussion?
Can I just get a clarification?
Yes.
This is just on the $10,000, Noreen? Okay, you're gonna do the 90 separately. Is that feasible?
I listed them separately, so, I mean, it sounds like there was an interest in voting on things very separately, so I was trying to accommodate that.
Other discussion? Call the roll, please.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
No.
Christensen?
No,
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
No.
Motion carries 4-3.
And then I would move that we allocate $90,000 for an LPD body-worn camera server to help with this initial phase implementation to evaluate the effectiveness of this tool and make it possible to do that.
Second.
Motion by Councilwoman Gaylord Baird, second by Councilwoman Raybold. Discussion? Would you, Councilwoman Lamb?
Repeat, I'll just repeat my objection to rating the People's Investment Fund for something like this.
Cindy, didn't you have it in your revision too?
Excuse me?
You have it listed in yours as well.
That was an offer to compromise.
Thank you.
Councilman Camp?
I'd just like to remind people that Tom Cassidy has been a wizard over the years in his budgeting, that when he was police chief, and I'm sure he still has a finger in this as public safety director, but he would budget things, and so he would get some savings in different areas, and then he's gone out and bought radios and other police cruiser equipment, so forth. And so I would just be willing to bet that in the police department budget, there's some areas that they can use to implement these items.
Can I just,
Councilwoman
I mean,
Gaylord Baird.
as I look at these LPD items, what I was recognizing was that, yes, I mean, LPD is very good at managing their budget, and they do manage to pay for a lot of their capital and equipment needs with savings, but their money for those purposes is taking a major hit this year with $1 million going towards the police garage. So recognizing that, I thought it was appropriate to support these items with the cash reserve fund.
Councilwoman Raybold?
I too am confident in our public safety director being able to take this money and leverage, and I anticipate he'll get more than 10.
Other
Body cameras
discussion?
and storage, yeah.
Call the roll, please.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
No.
Christensen?
no,
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
No.
Motion carries 4-3.
I'd move that we allocate $270,000 in fiscal year 18-19 for the purchase of 6 cruisers to support new staff in the police department.
Second.
Motion by Councilwoman Gaylord Baird, second by Councilwoman Raybold. Discussion? Usually, Councilwoman Raybold, you want to speak to your motion first?
I think I kind of explained pretty much.
Councilman Camp, Councilman Lamb?
So what else did we plan to do on these cruisers with the, these are for the SROs, rural resource officers?
just a comment that my understanding is the purpose of this is for the new SROs that will be at the middle schools, because they will be moving from site to site during the day as opposed to the high school SROs, which don't.
Other questions, comments,
I would
discussions?
say, I think it's a good use, but I think taking it from cash reserves, I can't support it.
I understand. Councilwoman Lamb, do you have?
Yeah, so I said last week, and I continue to believe that the police department has done an exemplary job of keeping a line item in for vehicles and repairs. I don't know that we really need we need dressed up police cars, because I do understand that the SROs at the high schools do not. And I don't, I'm a little disappointed when we were discussing SROs for the high school and we decided to have only 6 rather than 12, that this wasn't part of that discussion, that, oh, wait, we were going to need another vehicle for each of, or every 2 of these officers. And so I'm a little disappointed in that, and I don't know that they couldn't use some older or aging vehicles if they're just going to and from the schools. And I don't know what the chief's thought on that is, but I was a little surprised to see that in there, so.
Councilwoman Gaylord Beard and Councilman Raybold.
It actually was a part of those discussions. There was acknowledgement from LPD, both the chief and Tom Cassidy, I think, made it clear that the cost of a new officer that was being proposed as a part of the Safe and Successful Kids initiative did not include any of the equipment they need, did not include their cruisers, that really there's a lot more that the city is paying for every time we commit to hiring new police officers. And maybe, I mean, based on what you said, Cindy, I think it's probably wise to start asking them to provide the estimate that includes those items so that we are getting the true picture each time when we are considering hiring. It's probably a good idea. And then I think second point has to do with just good fiscal management of the fleet. We've seen what deferring purchasing of vehicles has done in the fire department on a larger scale because those are more expensive. But we don't want the LPD cruiser fleet to come to a point where we need to dump in a ton more money than can be adequately budgeted for in one particular year. So this is a way of sort of pacing and making sure that we're not smoothing, in a sense, those costs in a prudent way.
Councilwoman Raybold.
In my follow-up thought, I see Tom Cassidy here, but it's my understanding LPD, you know, they're gonna be using these vehicles for multiple shifts. It's not just tied into the SROs because they have a certain number of hours that they help and assist at the school, but it will be used for the second or the third shift as well, so, filling in that additional need and helping out on their fleet management as well.
Other discussion? Call the roll.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp,
No.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1.
Thank you. Next item, please.
I'd like to propose that we establish a community challenge grant fund to try and leverage private support for the park's significant capital projects that would otherwise be part of the quality of life bond listed in the CIP, and to take $1 million from the cash reserve to set up that fund.
Second.
Motion by Councilwoman Gaylord Baird, second by Councilwoman Raybold. Discussion? Councilwoman Lamb.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to amend, to put that $1 million into the police and fire pension, which I feel would be a better use of the $1 million than putting it into the parks, and certainly would allow us some savings on the interest we're currently paying on the unfunded liability of the pension plan.
A motion by Councilwoman Lamb, second by Councilman Christensen to amend the original motion. Discussion on that amendment. Councilwoman Raybold.
Is your thought that the savings from the pension plan would then be redirected towards the challenge grant for the quality of life bond? Is
No,
that-
it didn't
It
include that,
could
no.
be redirected to anything,
Yeah,
future budgets.
yeah, it's
And-
future budgets.
And do we know that amount with a great deal of certainty? You were just saying it's 8% of,
$1 million is 80,000.
is 8,000,
80.
80.
On an annual ongoing basis.
My thought here was that we could leverage these dollars to garner additional private dollars that would help pay for some of these projects that otherwise the city is on the hook for the 100% of the cost. Again, projects like Old Pavilion, projects like the Teacher's Fountain, which are going to take a lot more than 80,000, and might also be able to raise more than 80,000 in the private sector to support those. I think we could leverage more private dollars here than we could save on the pension with this kind of allocation for pension.
At the moment, we're discussing the amendment too.
Mhm.
Councilwoman Lamb, did you?
If ever, yeah, back to me.
Is there any other discussion? Back to you.
Okay, so I believe that the role of government is safety of its people, and that $1 million, it makes more sense and it should be higher priority to put this money as the rest has been allocated to police and fire, and the police and fire pension allows us to do that.
I think a statement I've made over the years is past city councils in the 1980s and 90s would say, here are revenues, here are expenses, and whatever's left over we'll put in the pension. And that's just the wrong way. The pension is an obligation. It's attached directly to property taxes. So I like to see I appreciate the motion here to fund what we've got a commitment to, and it can achieve some side savings and that 8% savings. But that's a guarantee, and we've got to face that and not keep pushing the can down the road, because the can is still there.
Councilman Raybold.
I'm not going to support this motion because we have made a commitment on, as a city council going forward last year, to make sure that we do everything that we can based on the actual recommended values of funding, and that we've made that commitment to stick to that.
We're taking the low end of the actuarial recommendations.
Yes.
Councilman Christensen.
And when we made those adjustments previously to the police fire pension fund, it was my express concern at that point that this council or any future council would say, look, we've already dealt with it, now we don't have to deal with it anymore.
That's not what I'm
That was
saying.
step one. We've still got to put money into this police fire pension fund, more than we're doing now, because essentially what's happened in the past is we've taken unlawful loans against the police fire pension fund, and we've spent the money on other things. We owe this money. We're talking about paying money we owe now to save on interest payments every year going forward. So that's why I'm supporting it.
I suggest it's not unlawful, but it's
Well-
imprudent, irresponsible.
If you were trying to take a direct loan out of it, it would be unlawful.
Councilman Eskridge.
Thank you. For my 7+ years on council, we've been trying to make up a hole that councils in the past dug. And it's been serious, because we have invested significant increases in dollars for the pension. And I'm interested in finding a way to do that as well, if there are ways we can add to it. I also know the needs of Parks and Rec and their facilities. Aud in particular is a need. We've got a new old facility, the Muni bathhouse, where the Muni pool was. John, you were probably there many times.
I was there.
We've got that great facility, historic facility.
I rode my bike.
And if John Camp would give the city so much money, we'll put your name on it, and this will match those funds, and we'll have that great facility.
They had a neat fountain there in kind of a sloped area that I used to.
The fountain would be
But
great.
somebody got it, it's gone. Lynn didn't save it.
Well, and I would just want to reiterate to think about parks, projects like this as infrastructure. They are assets of the city that have to be maintained. And to also think about it as economic development, because when you think about what helps make Lincoln competitive and what makes it a city that people want to live in, we can recruit people here to work, and workforce development is a huge priority. It's things like the parks assets that increase the quality of life that really do matter beyond just the enjoyment we have of them as residents. So I think that this is very important, and I hope you'll support it.
We have an amendment.
Right.
The
Sorry,
amendments
not the
to-
amendment, the entire concept.
So now we're voting on the amendment.
Amendment.
Raybold?
No.
Schob?
No.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
No.
Gaylor Baird?
No.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion fails 3-4.
Now, would you call the roll on the original motion, please?
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
No.
Christensen?
No.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
No.
Motion carries 4-3.
We are over by about a half an hour, so I'm going to encourage everyone to make their comments as brief and their questions as succinct as possible as we move to the next item.
Okay, this next item is to allocate the increased Keno appropriations in year 1 and 2 as described in the spreadsheet. I'll combine the two, if that works for you all. All right. Parks and Rec would get $305,750 in year 1 from full appropriation and would get $173,820 from Keno in year 2, 1920, fiscal year 1920.
Second.
Motion by Councilwoman Gaylord Baird, second by Councilwoman Raybold. Discussion, Councilwoman Lamb.
Thank you. Yes, I would make a motion to amend to appropriate those funds specifically that are for Parks and Rec. I believe it's 305,760 in year 1 and $255,240 in year 2. Appropriate those to specifically for EAB response.
Second.
We have a motion to amend by Councilwoman Lamb, and a second by Councilman Camp. Motion to amend.
If I could,
Your numbers don't.
I'm gonna let Councilwoman Lamb address her motion briefly, and then
Thank you.
Councilwoman Raybold has a question.
sure.
Can you repeat your motion, please?
Sure. So my motion is to amend, is to put the $305,750 that is of what's put towards the Parks and Rec, to earmark that for Emerald Ash Borer response. And then in year 2, there are 2 allocations for parks. One is $173,820. One is $170,840. Excuse me, $940. And to put those, specifically earmark those for Emerald Ash Borer response. And I believe that the Emerald Ash Borer, and I'm offering this because I believe the Emerald Ash Borer is been indicated that it's a priority for the city, and I think that it gives us an opportunity to address that with the park portion of the funds.
Before we go to council questions, I want to ask.
Can I just clarify, Cindy, the $170,940 is shown in Lyrian's proposal as library, and so by the percentages that we currently have, that would be library funding.
It can't be used.
That's the 170,000 one?
Yes,
Yeah.
Thank you.
179.
Okay, I apologize. So I'm looking at, I'll, if I can, I modify my motion to earmark the $173,820 to the Emerald Ash Borer.
So for clarification, you're saying both the $305,750 in year 1 and $173,820 in year 2 will all be earmarked exclusively for Emerald Ash Borer?
Correct.
Councilwoman Gaylord Baird.
I wanted to clarify, in the spreadsheet you sent yesterday afternoon, it doesn't say Emerald Ash Borer response, it says new general funded personnel. Are you suggesting, is this motion about replacing the arborists that are general fund positions?
Well,
Can you clarify the
Sure,
use?
sure. The figures that were given to us by Parks and Recreation were greater than these amounts for treatment Emerald Ash Borer response, and I am suggesting that these would be allocated towards whatever they wanted to replace. I'm suggesting that it go towards Park and Rec for Emerald Ash Borer response, rather than just be generally appropriated.
I think finance would like to.
I just want to clarify to make sure we understand. So this would be additional money from the reserve that Lyrian, so this would increase the Emerald Ash Borer response on top of what's in the mayor's recommended budget. Is that right?
Well, I will have a motion later to use that to decrease the tax rate for the people of Lincoln. So, but for this particular instance, that would be
I
increasing.
thought this was
Councilman
from the
Camp,
Keno.
yes.
Are we not?
This is from Keno.
This is from Keno.
You
I'm
said-
sorry.
It is with Keno.
I'm sorry, here.
Okay.
And my motion directs it to the CIP 0881, which is Parks and Rec Priority Repair and Replacement Renovation, which is the traditional use of Keno.
And so,
Brief follow-up?
sure. So that, that particular fund, 881, is a new fund that's been created this year in the CIP and is reportedly funded with $850,000 each year from general fund revenue.
Lynn, jump in here. I don't think that's a new project. It's additional funding to an existing project. Would that be correct?
That is correct, yeah, the Emerald Ash Borer funding is in two different locations. The staffing and the equipment is in the operating budget, and I don't have that number in front of me. And then within the CIP, there is also an Emerald Ash Borer response, and that is for contractual removal of trees that are larger than 18-inch, about 50 of those trees a year, and then the replacement money is in the CIP or the capital improvement program as well. I don't have the CIP in front of me, and I can't remember whether that's funded with general revenue or whether it's funded with Keno.
No, we're looking at A81, which is funded $850,000 a year.
860 is the project. It's on page 63. It's funded with general revenues of $269,000 approximately in 1819.
I'm sorry, it's funded with just only 269 of general revenues? In the CIP?
Yeah, $268,800 in 1819, and then 1920, $276,800.
And I'm sorry, would you read what the title of that in the CIP is?
Emerald Ash Borer Treatment and Recovery Project 860.
And, excuse me, that's the project that is intended, at least during these upcoming 2 years, the upcoming biennium. We would use some of that for contractual removal of large trees. A majority of that is going to be used to plant 1,000 new trees a year.
Okay, so what perhaps I have the number written down wrong. I have the same program that the councilwoman is, or the same CIP that the councilwoman is suggesting that we put these funds into, which is entitled
Priority Repair Replacement Renovation Project 0881.
881, Priority Repair.
And just to clarify, that's where Lyrian suggested directing the additional Keno fund money, and I think Cindy is now suggesting that that money instead be used for Emerald Ash Borer treatment. Whether that was operating money or CIP money, I don't think I'm totally certain yet, Cindy, what you're.
No, what I said was that the fund she's proposing that the money go into, the 881, is currently funded $850,000 a year by general funds.
It's got zero in the upcoming biennium. It has imagined revenue of $650,000 in the 2020 year going forward, but nothing in 1819 and nothing in 1920.
I guess I was online on the CIP. Do I have the wrong CIP?
You might, because you may have or the current version, and this would be next year's version. That could be a possibility.
I mean, the one online is, I believe, the most up-to-date. It's the city council edition.
So, but is this funded, this 881 is funded with $850,000 a year?
No.
There's no appropriations in year one, year two.
And, okay.
It's zero, both years.
And that's what's online.
Yeah, but
There's been a request for a short break. How about we do 5 minutes? But realizing we need to make some adjustments to the schedule, we have a 3 p.m. city council meeting, and we have a long way to go to get there. 5-minute break. Yes. exceeded that by about 40 minutes. We had
So
a
far.
couple of pre-councils, and we have a hard 3 o'clock city council meeting. Now, I'd like to suggest we continue with this portion of our budget until 2:20 PM. And then we make a break for our pre-council, and our directors' meeting will just hold until next week. So, I haven't said that, that's about another 40 minutes.
Unless we finish sooner.
Unless we can finish sooner. No later, yeah. At 2:20, we're stopping the discussion of the budget and moving into a pre-council session.
Angie's trying to get your,
Hi, Angie.
At what point would you like Teresa to brief you on any changes to the agenda for the city council meeting? At
She'll,
2:20?
she'll, yes, I think that from 2:20 to 2:30, perhaps, yes.
20 to 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chair, just to
Right.
clarify,
Yes,
then
Mayor's
we're
office.
preparing, if time remains, to do the parking garage pre-council because it's a higher priority in terms of
Yes.
timing, and put off the 13th Street to another time with the indulgence of the council.
Happy day.
I think we'd be happy to indulge that. Councilwoman Lamb.
yes, so I would just like to apologize. I actually was getting figures off of the CIP that went in front of the planning commission, not in the final one that came in my book. Sorry.
So we're discussing the motion to amend still? Yep. Is there any additional discussion, the motion to amend? You want to go ahead with your motion? Your figures,
The motion to amend what, oh, no, no, I do still believe we should, that we should put those towards the EAB response. I think that's what the motion that's up before us, right?
just so we have a motion by Councilwoman Lamb and a second
Yes.
by Councilman Camp to amend. And with no additional discussion, would you please call the roll?
Raybold?
No.
Schob?
No.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
No.
Gaylor Baird?
No.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion fails 3 to 4.
And now our original motion.
All right.
Which is,
To,
Put these in the Parks and Rec priority
Challenge.
repair and replacement. Actually, this is the
Oh,
the
sorry.
Keno money being directed to the priority repair and replacement.
One motion behind, aren't I? Sorry.
are we ready? Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
No.
Christensen?
yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
No.
Motion carries 5 to 2.
I would
What, was it
propose,
4 to 3?
You should listen.
propose that we fully appropriate for the library in year 1 and allow for the increase in year 2. That's 138,600 in year 1, it's 170,940 in year 2. The finance staff has provided some detail on how that would, or they can provide some detail to us on how that would work in accordance with Pat Leach's budget. Again, purchasing media so that general fund dollars are freed up to allow for the restoration of Bennett Martin hours and facilities improvements.
We have a motion by Councilwoman
Second.
Gilbert, second by Councilman Royball. Any other discussion? As the documents are being passed out. Just to discuss?
So this is a two-step thing to move.
It's a two-step thing, and when I discussed it before, we were just trying to keep it high level, but it seems really important to have this detail at this point, given where our discussions of Keno have gone.
Other questions or comments? Discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
No.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
No.
Motion carries 5 to 2.
I'd like to then propose, I'd like to just clump these all together. These are all uses of Keno revenue that are directed to the finance department, who then distributes them according to the formula. You'll see 700 in year 2 for human services, 28,000 that would go to the state. The general fund would get 14,000, and the county would get 43,890.
So the last 4 items.
The last 4 items in the spreadsheet, yep.
Seconds.
We have a motion by Councilwoman Gaylord Barrett, second one by Councilwoman Raybold. Discussion. I was
Just
gonna
to be clear, this is money that would be distributed regardless
Right.
of whether we allocate it, it'd still go to those.
Plus a 1% increase.
This is the piece,
This
there
is the
is
piece.
language in the
Right,
resolution that
but-
would direct us to do this.
Right.
But right now, this money isn't imagined in the mayor's budget because they don't increase to 4% growth. They
But
would,
in the end,
yeah,
the money would go to
right.
those sources.
I was just trying to be transparent about how this money is
This is more of an
moving.
encouragement to be more,
Okay.
So you're raising from 3 to 4% on this.
Yes.
Okay. And again, I just restate my position, it's gonna be there anyway, so.
other discussion? Would you call the roll, please, on these, this is a group of 4 items.
Rabel,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp,
No.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird.
Yes.
Lamb.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1.
And I think that wraps up that.
Sure, any other- yeah, that's- I'm done.
Does anyone else in the council have proposed changes, suggested changes? Councilman, I'm sorry, Councilman Christensen, please help me.
Okay, so I don't know if we already agreed on this or not, but whether we are going to accept new changes, or were we only voting today on things that were proposed last Thursday?
I think we kind of were, and I think Councilwoman Lamb's gonna help us get there.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right.
So I am going to move that we transfer $535,000 from the Bryan facility to fire apparatus for fiscal year 18-19.
Can you put, where are
Let's
you?
get- oh, sorry.
Sure, I'm on the last of my proposal,
Last page?
The spreadsheet?
yeah, of the new one you got yesterday.
I'd like a second so we can talk. A motion by Councilwoman Lamb,
Second.
second by Councilman Christensen.
Which, are
Councilwoman
you
Lamb,
on
would you
this?
like to speak to your motion?
Sure, so
Can you tell me again where you're at?
Right here.
in the sources,
Okay.
yeah. So, this would go to the bus apparatus, for fiscal year 18-19, $535,000 from currently in the brine plant, and I think this would be the second brine plant. That money was moved from the snow removal fund last year, at the end of the fiscal year, to the brine plant. And what I'm suggesting is that we use that towards replacement of another fire apparatus.
Good discussion.
Well, I mean, this is another new proposal that we haven't had time to examine with staff, and I thought we were gonna go through your other proposals that you presented last week, if there are still some that you wanna bring forward. It seems to me this could still be up for discussion as we go through the budget process. We could certainly still consider new proposals. I mean, we're going to be listening to city input from residents, and we have a chance to make amendments again, but in terms of voting on this today, it's hard when we don't have a chance to find out all the details of
Well,
facility.
and so I guess my response to that is, when we left this meeting on Thursday, we didn't restrict discussion today to whatever was suggested in specific form. My understanding from your lips were that we would be looking at potential compromise, and I didn't,
You're saying that, I did not say that, I didn't say anything about,
I think.
I said that the two proposals that were presented on Thursday were not mutually exclusive, and that's true, and that's what I said.
Okay, and so for this, initially in my proposed compromise, I had proposed that we take the $535,000 in order to alleviate some of the rating of the People's Investment Fund from the general reserve funds. But what I'm suggesting now is that because that did not pass, we went ahead and passed all of that source, that we use this source for another fire apparatus.
I'm gonna pause, Councilwoman Raybold, and
I
let
just
the
have a
finance.
question.
let the fin-
Let Jane go first.
Okay,
So I guess the question is this coming from existing appropriated funds, or is that an accurate number, Sherry, or
I
can
guess
you?
that's a point I wanted to make to clarify, Cindy. Again, you're suggesting that we take appropriations from the existing CIP project. And I would request a little assistance from Mickey perhaps, but it's my understanding that perhaps part of that money has been spent since it was appropriated. And I think there are also some issues with the percentages between general fund money and street construction money. And so we couldn't use the street construction dollars for just any purpose.
So to answer your question, at the end of the fiscal year, $535,000 was moved by executive order to the brine plant from snow funds. So that's what I'm suggesting, is now we take those funds and move those towards, this wouldn't be anything that's currently in the budget, as far as, this is money that's already previously appropriated to the brine funds. So it'd be one-time funds.
But those funds there's a split there. I think there's 15% funded by general fund and 85% by street construction money. So that brine facility is purpose for the streets, and taking that and moving it to purchase fire apparatus doesn't comply with the intent of the street construction funds.
So well, okay, I understand what you're saying. Last year when we inquired into it, I had discovered there were about $1.5 million in excess fund that was in snow removal, and that was being moved to a couple of places. The one that the mayor moved was into the brine facility. My understanding was there's no longer a requirement that street funds fund snow removal. Perhaps I understood incorrectly. What I'm saying.
What he's saying is the brine facility has a street purpose.
I can help. 900,000 was left over in the 16-17 year, not $1.5 million. And
In snow funds alone, right?
when you use street dollars for something like fire apparatus, that's just not a lawful use of those funds. In the 16-17 savings, there's a split. 85% of the funds are for transportation purposes and legally used for transportation uses. 15% is general funded, and there's flexibility to use them how you want, even on fire apparatus. So I think there's a color of money issue that has to be sorted out and investigated to see how much of the 533, I think you mentioned, is how much calculates out to be flexible dollars that you could use for the intended purpose.
I withdraw my motion.
Councilman Camp.
Well, I don't agree to withdraw it, because this is similar to, I think we talked about the two-step on the libraries. So you just step things, so take the whole general fund constructed portion of the snow, if we're looking at what, 3-some million a year?
I'm sorry.
What was totally for the snow funds, like 3.5 million?
So 3.75, but remember that 85% of that
Right.
fund is transportation street money, highway allocation, and not eligible for general uses, and then 15% is general revenue.
Okay, so 15% of 3.7 million is gonna be about, what, 450,000?
562,000, so it would fund the 535.
Okay, I didn't have
Yeah,
my calculator.
yeah, so I don't
So we'll
withdraw
just
my
do it.
motion.
The precedent that we have is when we are asked for the distribution of leftover or carryover or whatever is remaining, then we apply those percentages to what is left over.
No, and so we're just taking what I'm suggesting is, I don't agree with two-step approaches, but since it's been done so many other places, we just say, out of the snow fund, then that 15%, that you'll still have the snow fund money, but what'll happen is put the brine into that and then take the 15% to do the
And
fire
then
apparatus.
That's probably worth an examination, exploration. We need time to see whether or not that would work. Because remember, we're talking about a 16-17 carryover that has funds that have been expended, now that it's 2018. So those budgets have been drawn down in good faith because they were part of the CIP. So when you're looking at allocations of funding for the brine facility, we've been acquiring the materials, equipment, and supplies, so there might not even be dollars left. So
Well, no, my understanding, I asked Lonnie a month ago, and he said, no, the brine plant's not being built.
Oh, I don't think so.
That's what you told me,
Yeah,
Lonnie.
we have not built it yet.
But the tankers, all of that equipment have been procured. So we have to just analyze, we need some time to analyze whether or not there are dollars left, and then what we could allocate to a general purpose.
Well, and just for your information, I'm gonna propose that we eliminate brine use in Lincoln, Nebraska as part of the Streets and Roads
I
initiative.
understand, okay.
So could we have more time? Cindy, so we could get an accurate figure of what has already been expended towards the brine facility and the actual dollar amount?
Yeah, I
Can you
think,
provide?
sure, I think that we can deal with this further in the budget.
So,
You have made a motion, it's been seconded by Councilman.
Right, I withdraw my motion.
Mr. Chair, could we focus on the things that Cindy presented last Thursday? Is that possible?
That's where we're going. We're moving to the half-cent sales tax, or tax rate reduction that I,
So help us better understand, they're numbered 1 through 4, which ones have we already addressed? Have we already addressed?
the tax rate, I had sent one that was tax rate reduction, and I had estimated, and I had suggested, remember, these were suggestions, we weren't asked for absolute figures, and I had suggested a combination of things, including the potential no raise option. I suggested possibly freezing or not hiring the FTEs that are in the current budget. I suggested perhaps we could go back and have departments to cut, that has had increased expenses over 4%, to bring it back down to 4%, and those were a number of different ideas. I was not and received no response from the administration on any way or in any staff in an attempt to bring those particular things in fruition. So my proposal at this point is that we, and I would move that we, in order to reduce the tax rate by 1/2 cent, that we would attribute the earmark $305,750 that from Keno funds, it's for Parks and Rec, to the Emerald Ash Borer, and we would then appropriate $100,000 from CIP number 919, which is the Urban Development Downtown Irrigation System Replacement, which was increased by that amount. And I'm talking 1819, that we would appropriate $100,000 from CIP number 382, the Downtown Public Improvement, that added $150,000 per year to from the 1618 to 1820, and then that we would appropriate the $544,250 from snow removal savings.
Okay, that's a motion.
Mm-hmm.
Motion by Councilwoman Lamb, second by Councilman Christensen. I'd like to, a little point of clarification. Councilwoman Lamb, are you saying that the documents that you provided us with yesterday are an expansion or an elaboration on the thing that you presented on Thursday?
They're more specific, yes. They're specific ways to do it rather than the general ways that I gave.
And Councilman Eskridge was asking, would we be voting on the 1 through 4 items as motions that you presented in your original suggestions?
No, number 2 hasn't been brought up yet. Oh, I see what he was asking, right?
Yeah, he would ask, would you make a motion, and then we all talk.
Oh, and then so we're on, I actually started with number 4, I guess, I'm sorry.
So there's a motion on the floor by Councilwoman Lamb, and a second by Councilman Camp. Discussion, Councilman Ray, Councilwoman.
and I have a concern because I'm trying to follow along how you calculated these numbers, and do you have a backup sheet to that? And have those numbers been run by staff, and have they validated those numbers?
The backup sheet is CIP's numbers, and I provided you with the CIP numbers for each of those in my mailing. So,
Councilwoman Gaylord Baird.
I think one of the things that we have to continue to kind of bring our focus back to is ongoing versus one-time uses of money. And something like an irrigation replacement isn't going to happen each year. It's a one-time expense. And snow removal may have some savings in it one year that are not achieved in the second year if it's a worse winter. And so I don't see something that's sustainable in this combination of elements that we could then bank on to support your proposal.
Then I suggest I'll itemize each one, we can vote on each one, and then I would ask that that finance department just apply whatever tax rate is appropriate based on that. So I would bring forward first the savings from the Keno funds attributed to Parks and Rec of $305,750 be earmarked for the Emerald Ash Borer and replace the general fund funding of that particular item.
And there's a motion and a second. Councilwoman Raybold.
I'm a little confused, because on your supplement that you did provide, it doesn't list that amount. It lists 464,350 savings due to additional Keno funds, and then it talks about 250,000 CIP number 881 being used to go for that tax increase. But again, the question is, since you said you were working off the CIP that was provided by the planning department, again, that was my question. Are these numbers, have they been validated and reviewed and approved? Or do you want us just to talk about just the property tax rate reduction?
I would be fine with that, to just vote for the finance department, identify $1.05 million in each year, 2017, 18, 18, 19, and 2019, 20 for purposes of a tax rate reduction, and I'll make that as a motion to amend.
They don't have the authority to do that. The administration has the authority to do that. They can't give you $1.05 million of cuts. That's a policy decision that you make, that's a policy decision that we make.
Okay.
So I would appreciate if we could clarify
So
that.
the motion to amend should be that the administration identify those savings.
Okay,
Yeah.
you're making a motion to have the mayor identify cuts in his own budget for your tax reduction.
Right, to confer with
While
those.
here, can that happen?
Well, she could ask them to do that. I don't know that you're necessarily required to in this case. I mean, I thought her approach originally is the intellectually proper approach. She says, I want to cut the taxes this amount. I've identified these things should be cut. Now, I think it makes sense in a different circumstance to go line by line. In Councilwoman Lamb's approach, it made sense to take it as a package, because she was saying, I want this cut, so in the taxes, so here are my proposed cuts on the other side. And I understand what Councilwoman Raybold is saying about have these been vetted, but the step we're taking today is policy direction from the council, and then what's expected from the finance department is to work through the numbers and say, yes, these numbers work at the end of the day, or no, these numbers don't work. But before they can do that work, they need direction from the council. And today we're talking about the majority of the council as far as what they should be working on. So that's really the purpose.
I appreciate that, thank you. And I was totally fine with the general request, and then I was asked for specific figures at the end of the week. So I was, for my fellow council members, I was trying to respond to that request to give certain figures where we could find that certain money. And I do believe, as my general request was, that that motion, and I'm not sure at this point if I just withdraw my motions and then I'll make a motion on the general. How would that be? I think
I
that.
feel like we have a motion that was seconded where you had the whole proposal together that probably needs to be withdrawn.
Right, yeah.
So
So I'll withdraw that, and instead I'll offer a substitute motion. Thank you. To reduce the property tax levy by ½ cent, and by whatever means the administration can identify through the staff in cuts to spending, or cuts to spending throughout the city, but not including any fire or police or fire, police, or public safety cuts. Now I need a second.
I'll second that, but let's include city council, because I don't want suddenly the administration come back and penalize us.
So we have a motion by
Does
Councilwoman.
include city council.
it does.
We have,
There goes our staff.
No, I don't think our
I'd like to
spending.
recognize,
I think it's intellectually dishonest to turn to the mayor's office and cut your own budget. you have to take responsibility for the cuts and additions that the council makes. You can't rely on the mayors to make that choice for you. That, I don't think that's an intellectually fair way to do this, because then we are held responsible for cuts that you made, and then you shrug your shoulders and say, well, the mayor made those cuts. You have to identify your cuts. I think that's a responsible way to handle this.
So we're hearing both sides here.
You're hearing both sides from me.
Well, I'm hearing both sides from the city, your city attorney, your attorney, and you, that the general was okay.
He said exactly that.
Rick just said, is what I thought you did originally was the intellectually appropriate thing to do when you said, I want to get here as far as a tax cut, here's how I would fund that. Now, whether it is very specific or more general, either way it can work. If you can get that past this council, you've given direction to the finance department to look at the numbers and then come back to the council and say, yes, those numbers add up, or you actually exceeded it by 200,000, or you're $500,000 under, or whatever. But they need direction from the majority of the council on what numbers to work on in order to give them direction as far as financing the tax cut. I think it's appropriate for the council to specify where to look. That's what I said, and that's why I guess I'm repeating.
Councilman Christensen.
I think we're getting way ahead of ourselves, okay? And because this is only my third time with this rodeo, but
Yeah, my first.
in the past, these kind of changes were made on the dais from the dais after we had a budget in front of us. We don't have to do that now. We can still make all these changes, proposals,
Between now and August 20th.
from the dais in future budget hearings.
And I'm just gonna
Councilman Miracle.
concur with that. You know, certainly I think some of us are very supportive of a property tax rate reduction. However, without doing it with the process of identifying where those cuts are made, I may not support a property tax reduction based on where you are going with that request. And so, and Roy's right, we can make those changes. My concern are those numbers properly vetted by the staff? And it doesn't sound like there has been enough time to get staff input on some of the things that you're directing.
Councilwoman Grable, but I think you're missing the step. The step is, if she's made the general categories, if she gets 4 votes, then the finance department can firm those numbers up. But I don't think it's proper to firm the numbers up before there's been given direction. That's why we do this step so early in the process.
So, the law
I think
department's
we're saying the
recommendation,
same thing.
I'm
Different
sorry,
way.
yeah.
Brian,
So,
you're saying the same thing, different way.
so the law department's recommendation would be that today we vote on whether, we vote on my motion, or a motion to reduce the property tax rate by 1/2 cent, and that it could be paid for in all or in part by limiting proposed hiring of new FTEs funded by the general fund to FTEs requested for public safety and transportation. Any departments, and that's one. Number 2, any departments except public safety, police and fire that has proposed a budget greater than a 4% growth should reduce its overall budget to no greater than 4% growth. And to put Pershing on the tax rolls for, the $100,000 a year savings or so, not until year 2.
If that's your request, I think that is specific enough that the finance department can get back to you and say, yes, we make those changes, here's where you end up.
Thank you. I apologize to my colleagues because I was asked for specific numbers and I didn't mean to tie us up like that, but that would be my motion, which is number 4 in my recommendation.
Restate that.
Sure. My motion is to reduce the property tax levy by 1/2 cent. This could be accomplished by, a combination, all or in part by, limiting proposed hiring of new FTEs funded by the general fund to FTEs requested for public safety and transportation. Number 2, any department except public safety, police and fire that has proposed a budget greater than 4% growth should reduce its overall budget to no greater than 4% growth. And 3, I'm not going to include the Pershing one. That's what would be my direction.
Number 3 here.
Yeah, and then it could be also funded in part by eliminating pay increases in fiscal 18-19 for any non-union employee who received increases greater than 3% in fiscal year 17-18 and limit fiscal year 19-20 increases to 3% of fiscal year 17-18 salaries for the same personnel. And I can send you a copy of that if you like.
Thank you.
You
That'd be
bet.
great.
That's my
That
motion.
was from motion, Councilman Christensen seconded. We're open for discussion. Councilman Gayler.
So this was submitted last week, and so I would be interested to get any information that could be provided from staff as to the actual impact or the amounts and whether or not they add up, because we have had some time staff should have had some time to react to this. Can you help us understand
Do you have a list?
Yeah.
This is-
Figure out like 4%.
an equation that works?
Okay. I'm gonna walk down the list, starting with
And
number 3.
watching the clock, so I'm gonna give you about
Okay.
4 minutes and then we're gonna vote.
Okay, eliminate pay increases for 18-19, so non-union employees, that's not, I'm looking at that not only as directors, but there's E's, X's, so it's more classes than just the D's, which are the directors, so, I calculated that this would impact 61 people, total savings of $171,840 in year 1, and in year 2, $186,786 in year 2. I don't have it segregated by fund yet, and that's one thing that we'd have to go back and take more time to look at all the different funding sources for all those.
Can I speak to that issue as well? Council, please need to consider the M-Class union formed on this very issue many years ago. They were not given raises much in the similar fashion that happened here, and they unionized. You do run some risk if you're going to treat that class of people separate from everyone else, that they choose to go ahead and form, albeit small unions, they could do that, and then we'd have to negotiate with about 70 people. Well, divided into several unions, I think, just based on their classes. Keep in mind right now, the only reason they're not in unions is because they represent departments that actually deal with those unions in some sort of capacity, whether it be in human resources or in the law department. You're on safe ground with the directors. We're not going to unionize. But I'm not sure you're on the same safe ground with those other unrepresented classes.
I appreciate Mr. Hoppy's comments. That's why this is just one of many recommendations that can be used all or in part, so.
So we're currently-
Moving on.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Moving on to 4A, limiting proposed of hiring new FTEs by the general fund, except for public safety and transportation. So these are new positions within the 19-20 budget. This doesn't include any mid-biennium changes. There are 3 positions added outside of those departments. That would generate $205,450 in savings. That would be for a HR generalist, the Wilderness Park position, and a mechanical maintenance worker for Parks and Rec.
If I could ask, so what we received from the Parks and Rec Department regarding their proposed budget, they listed a number of positions that were going to be general fund funded.
Okay.
And so are those, it was more than 3. And so I would just ask that the department look further into that.
A lot of those are reclassifications of current positions and not necessarily new positions beyond the current FTEs.
So they showed as new FTEs from new general funds, but I would just ask the department to look into that further.
Okay.
Thank you.
4B, any departments except public safety, police and fire, that has proposed growth of more than 4%. So I've identified the departments, I'll list them. In total, that would be savings of approximately $1.8 million, and then $2.5 million approximately in year 2. And I'm looking at departments impacted, city unassigned, so that's all the benefits. the majority of all the benefits for general fund employees are within that. So, cutting we can't cut contractual benefits. So there's question there, I guess, that might need more clarification. Interfund transfers in year 2 would be impacted. These are the transfers that help fund tax-supported funds like aging, health, Star Tran. So there's a number of interfund transfers that go out. Finance would be impacted, the mayor's office, human resources, city council, and urban development.
How much would city council be impacted, for
Um,
instance?
Year 1 for city council, $45,621. And then 1920 year 2, $40,791.
Can you explain that to me? Because I didn't see that kind of an increase in our, we've had an FTE on the books for 2 years.
So I'm taking the 17-18 budget per department and
Mhm.
comparing it to 18-19. And then that's where the growth, that's what shows the growth increase, because primarily that research analyst position that was added from the prior year budget.
Thank you. Thank you. So it looks there's about 2.3 million, does that look right? That they could cobble together about something, about the 1.8 million, 2.3 million? Thank
I
you.
think we would need to clarify that a large portion of that needs further analysis. We can't cut the fringe benefits for the public safety that you exempted from the motion, for
Right.
example. So those numbers need a lot of refining on what would actually be
Right.
available.
And I think the city attorney made that clear, that we can just look at these areas and have you guys do the rest of the work to make it happen if folks are able to lower the tax levy rate by 0.5 cent, which is the motion.
We have a motion by Councilwoman Lamb, second by Councilman Christensen. I see no other discussion. Let's call the roll.
Raybold.
Yes.
Schob.
Wait, hold on a second. Can you clarify what the motion is?
The motion is to reduce the property tax levy 1/2 cent, and to get offsetting savings from limiting hires of new FTEs, except for public safety, limiting departments to 4% growth, and eliminating pay increases for non-union employees.
That earned greater than 3% in 17-18.
Yes,
Okay.
I'll be referring back to your list, that's
Thank
my
you.
shorthand.
Yes. Mhm.
And basically, for clarification, it's something that we're asking and instructing our department directors to look at and bring us back these numbers, and that we will bring them forward for further discussion in public hearing, and whether or not that's the direction that we want to go. I have stated before that I'd like to see the numbers in their completion, and instead of these early estimations,
This will become a part of the city council budget.
Yeah.
If we vote.
Yeah. And I did also in that suggestion, if you recall correctly, in that suggestion, I asked that the mayor's office contribute any other thoughts it may have on finding additional cuts. But, but I did do that. I mean, that was part of the original suggestion, so,
Well,
so,
I'd like.
we're voting, I'm
to
sorry.
change my vote.
Thank you.
Would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Raybold,
No.
Schob,
You changed your vote?
Yes.
Okay,
I said
gotcha.
I'd like to change my vote.
Okay.
Thank you.
No.
Mhm.
Camp,
Yes?
Christensen,
Yes?
Eskridge,
No.
Gaylor Baird,
No.
Lamb.
Yes.
Motion fails 3-4.
And then I have one last motion that I'm going to bring to redirect the funds, up here.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, redirect the funds for the 14th and Warlick project, which is currently 7.2 million in year 1, little around 5 million in year 2, that are currently in the CIP, to be used for projects needed throughout the city for the 5-year period.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilwoman Lamb, second by Councilman Camp. Discussion about the Warwick project and redefecting. Councilman Eskridge.
Very quickly, this is a really big and expensive project, somewhere right now between $25 and $30 million. Use the lower number, $25 million, delay it 5 years. That means 5 years from now, that's going to cost, at a rate of inflation of 5%, $7.5 million more at that time. Makes no sense.
I'm sorry, Councilman Christensen.
I have made a personal commitment to the mayor that I would very cautiously keep separate the budget from discussions on sales tax for public streets. This is part of that discussion. And I have committed not to include that in the budget discussion because it's on the table with negotiations that are ongoing with the mayor's office about sales tax. So I'd appreciate if you withdraw that.
You're asking
I'm
Councilwoman
asking
Lamb to.
Councilwoman Lamb to withdraw that motion.
Okay.
You're talking about the sales tax on streets and roads.
That's right.
Okay, I
Those
just didn't
these are
understand.
two separate issues that I want to keep separate, that I've committed to keep separate, that I will not use the sales tax discussion to leverage the budget.
So Councilwoman Lamb, I'm sorry, this is in your court now.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
I'm not
We have
gonna.
a motion and a second, right?
Yeah, so I feel like where the sales tax is concerned, that we have to, as a city, show that we are willing to put our roads dollars citywide. I understand the talk about the savings, but the reality is we have citywide projects that need to be done, and they too will cost more if they have to be delayed. If we're going to ask the residents of Lincoln, Nebraska for more money in the form of sales tax, we have to first show that we're willing to close the gap. And so that's why I've proposed this, so that we can show the citizens of and residents of Lincoln that we can, that we are willing to make the hard choices in order to close the gap.
Councilwoman Raybold?
This makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I would suggest that if that is your reasoning, then we should just, withdraw any improvements that we're planning on Cornhusker Highway, and I'm pretty sure that they are probably 2 to 3 times this amount. So if you're using that supposition, then we should not be doing any road improvements anywhere in our city, because we're trying to save our taxpayers money. How does that save our taxpayers any money? By withdrawing projects that are clearly to the benefit of all the quadrants in our city that need this improvement. And I think Roy's original direction was probably the best one.
Councilman Christensen?
I agree with everything Councilwoman Lamb said about why and wherefore. But I personally made a commitment to separate these two issues.
Councilman Camp?
I look at this as a situation of trying to prioritize. It's not saying we're taking away projects or whatever, but the
It's in
prioritization,
the
I mean,
priority, right here.
may I talk?
Certainly.
Thank you, Councilman Camp.
Again, I remember in this very room, Alan Abbott, looking at a chart over there saying we do Antelope Valley and boom, item 32, all these other projects to 65, you're not gonna do, you have to defer them. And I think what the intent here is to get more to a prioritization. It's not that any of these projects are not good, but we can't just say, well, everything's gonna go up 5% a year, so let's go do everything now, let's just go break the bank, let's spend the whole cash reserve, let's just do it all now. Of course you'll save, but you've gotta prioritize. You cannot get everything done, and it's a process of triage and so forth. And I think that's what Councilmember Lamb is trying to at least get the theme across here of doing that. And so I guess on that point, on what Mr. Christensen is saying on his commitment, I don't know that you can bind the rest of us. I do understand that, and I know that I've talked in terms of delaying the project in in conjunction with the Streets and Roads bond. So I take cognizance of that. So kind of not sure.
Councilwoman Greg Gaylord Baird, briefly, if you can.
You're right about prioritization, and the CIP is an attempt to do that, not only in the upcoming biennium, but across 6 years, to try and signal to the community how things are being phased and structured over time, because we can't do it all at once. Without more information on how redirecting those funds might work and whether or not it works with the phasing of the CIP, I don't feel comfortable supporting this today. However, I would like more information about what would happen if we did delay this project, that we can continue to mull over as we move forward in the budget and see if there might be any cost-benefit analysis we want to run as a council to see what that might be. But for now, without knowing the impacts to the plans that the city has, purchasing right-of-way takes time, projects are often staged. I think it's hard to just make this kind of a change without understanding the domino effect. So I appreciate the intent. I'm not going to support it today, but I'm open to considering this as we go through the course of the budget. Some delay, maybe not the length of the delay.
I'm going to stop the debate there and ask for a roll call vote.
Raybold?
No.
Job?
No.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
No.
Eskridge?
No.
Gaylor Baird?
No.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion fails 2-5.
I think
No
that's-
further motions.
Thank you very much. I think that's all the business that comes before us today. I appreciate your patience with us. We are going to move right into the directors' meeting with the city clerk.
No, I thought we were going to pre-council.
Do her really quick.